which doesn't apply, to limit them to 20 acres and have the whole thing open if they wish to. And if we had to take it over and reclaim it, we might have to reclaim 36.4 plus 20 plus 80, the whole thing.
Right,
Why would
except
we not base?
Well, normally what would happen is we would not actually, the same as we would do for a subdivision or some other site, we would not necessarily reclaim the whole site. We would take the funds, stabilize the site, and then the county would not hang on to it. They would usually sell it, with the condition that the next applicant has to meet our rules, reclaim, et cetera. We would reclaim some of it, anything that we felt, and we would stabilize it. That's what we do with subdivisions. We don't finish subdivisions. We wouldn't finish this mine.
So we're gambling that they will not open up all of their acres within the next 5 years, and we therefore will not have to stabilize all of their acres.
We're somewhat, and as a board, you can certainly decide to increase the bond you require because you're concerned about that. That's just how we approach things, generally speaking.
All right, I'll just make a note to revisit that question. I can't find the page where they did the calculation, but it'll come up as Mike goes on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anybody else want to intervene on these points, board members? Okay. Excuse the interruption. Go ahead.
No, it's important clarifications. Regarding agency review, the town of Somerset has recommended approval of the CUP renewal / modification, and no comments have been received from the Wisconsin DNR. I would just clarify that email that was distributed for you to have a look at. I'll just read through this. It reads, we are direct neighbors of the 30-acre expansion, and we have several concerns. First would be our well, concerned about well and water quality issues due to mining and expansion. They indicate blast size is a big concern also. They indicate they've been home during a blast, very surprised at the intensity of the blast. Can these be controlled or downsized in the future is a question they pose. House foundation is also a concern. Those two photos that were included are represent two cracks in their lower level, and they indicate their daughter was home during a blast and noticed damage in her room. They indicate that Candy Anderson with Milestone had mentioned that they may be willing to place a seismic meter in their yard before the next blast, and certainly working with the property owner in that regard, if technically that makes sense, would probably be a good idea, is my thought on the matter. They also know, they're saying you're more than welcome to come by for the next blast to see how intense they are, or how intense they are. And so I just wanted to clarify what that comment was. I did get a voicemail from Karen Colham that indicated she wasn't available to attend this meeting, so she forwarded this email comment in lieu of that.
Did you take these pictures?
No, that was provided from the applicant.
And do we have a before picture for this basement?
We don't have as of now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are we to gather that the cracks, apparently there are two pictures and two cracks on two different walls, that they are in fact horizontal and that the camera wasn't turned 90 degrees?
You know, we just received this yesterday and haven't had an opportunity to follow up with the Colhams for clarification.
The word should be seismic, evidently.
Yes.
Seismic meter, SEISMIC, I believe is the way to spell that. Is the property of the Culhams, is the proposed expansion of the mining moving in the direction of their property?
Yeah,
Or
let
away
me-
from it?
Run back and maybe Kevin, you can flag which direction that's located.
The map cuts off right here to show the mine.
Yes.
I guess I'm supposed to stay here. The
See,
map
you're-
cuts off on the, I'll just use the, well, either one, they're the same map. The
Which
current and
map,
future map.
page 47, is that?
Yep, and if you look at the bottom of the map, if you would go,
That's an eight.
yeah, the other one's probably better because it shows further down. They are to the southwest of the corner of this map down here.
So the mining expansion is really moving in a, it's not necessarily getting closer, I guess. Some is and some isn't, huh? It-
Yep,
Yeah.
it's like down here.
I mean, they're moving in that direction. It may take some time to get fully down there, but
At
even
the-
the 30, 40-year
When-
operation period anticipated.
When the mine reached its full extent of that pink shaded area, it would be at least the width of a 40-acre field away from the home, just as it is now. Is that, am I interpreting that correctly?
I can let Candy Anderson from Milestone talk a bit further, but moving south and moving to the east and the southeast, it slowly is going to just progress throughout the whole thing, because as they move their equipment, they build berms along the sides, they move their equipment. In talking with her, she said it wouldn't make any sense to go straight down, then pick everything up and then start mining here. It's just like a slow progression throughout that whole time, so hope that answers what you're asking.
Yeah, so the conclusion is this expansion will not get closer to the Culham home.
Well,
It will.
It will, yeah, it's that left, the pink area there, what's the difference between the pink area and the arrows in the tan area to the left of it?
Oh, they're not, but they haven't mined in the tan area. Am I misreading this?
But the intent is to.
After they finish the pink area? Oh, it's simultaneously go
Simultaneously.
down both?
Yep.
I've got it.
Yes.
So, all right, so the Culham's
Both
concern is
east
appropriate.
and south.
I got it now.
Yeah, I noted when I read the staff report, pre-reviewed it, that the pink area was going to cause a problem, because I made the same assumption. The pink area is meaningless. It just happens to be something they colored on the map.
Fair enough, I've got it. Okay, so the neighbor's concern is appropriate, I guess. All right, proceed.
Again, your Board of Adjustment action, the board shall only grant a conditional use subject to provisions for this request, section 17.70A7, and with the 4 criteria referenced on this slide. And the Board of Adjustment, after contemplating all relevant information, may do one of the following: approve the request, deny the request, or table and postpone the decision to consider information gathered or request additional information. And the Board of Adjustment must stipulate findings to support their decision for approval or denial. Staff recommendation on this: staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit renewal with the following condition: all previous conditions shall remain in effect, and financial assurance bond shall be updated to cover the total area being mined. We can pull up on screen the application materials that we have included in the packet item here, if there are any specific questions about those. and, or it would be useful in any discussion. And I'd note that, again, the representative, the agent of, for Milestone Materials are here and can field questions or may wish to further present information on this item. At that, staff's available for questions you may have.
Board members? Would you pull up page 101? And I found that's where the cost is calculated for the reclamation bond amount. And let's see if we can understand how it works. Explain that if you would, Mr. Wozniak.
Yes, let's see. Okay, this page outlines, it kind of breaks down the various aspects of reclamation items and related costs, and indicates a total reclamation cost of $702,138, which equates to $6,952 per acre. And I might have Kevin join me if he could clarify how that 253,000 new amount was determined.
How is the 101
Or could
acres?
Candy Anderson better do that? Maybe if we could have, allow Candy Anderson, the agent for the, with Milestone, to respond to your question. I think she could better answer that than I can.
Well, I'm, just a minute now.
Okay.
You don't really want to shake my faith, do you?
Okay.
But if that's the way it has to be, then it has to be that way.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to say about in your presentation, Mr. Wozniak?
I think I'm complete. If
Good. Board members, questions for him? Mrs. Anderson? Oh,
How often do they blast on average? Once a week, once a day, once a month?
it would not be once a day. You know, on that front, I'm just trying to recall, Kevin, do you have a notion for past history, what's been?
Let me jump in to say, we get this, your department gets the same notices that the neighbors do when blasting is going to occur, don't you?
Yes.
All right, so in your files, you have, of course,
Yep.
records of all the notices you received. And you could, if desired, pull those out and
Yep.
calculate how
Yes.
often it happens.
Yep. And the way I've always understood it is they just do it as needed. I mean, they do it a time a week, a time every couple of weeks, but they blast a certain amount of area, and as they work through that, they might have to blast more in some areas and not as more in others. So to say it's 2 times a week or whatever, from past testimony when we've gone through this before, that's been sort of the answer.
The blasting is related to the dolomite, you know. First they take off the stuff that's already small, and then they get into the rock, and just as you read in their plan, then they have to break it up, and then they can work it, grind it up. Ms. Denzer, did you want to
I
comment?
was going to add that for a while, I was also on the email chain that received all the blasting notices, and they will occur sporadically, very sporadically. Like sometimes the months and months go by before they blast again. And I would say it's maybe about, just pre-COVID this is, but about 3 times a year. And then it may be for a week or 2 straight, or 3 or 4, and then it stops. so it comes and goes, very
Seems to
short.
me I recall from previous testimony, and undoubtedly Ms. Sanderson will clarify it, that they have a special team of people that do the drilling and blasting, and they're not on site all the time. They bring them in and kind of do that in a batch process, so, and it's a function of how much they sell, naturally. So it's a little complicated, but, you know, imagine the homeowner might schedule a wedding for the very week when the blaster is going to arrive, you know, and they're both planning independently of each other.
A celebration of the wedding.
Yeah, that's right. Time it for the 4th of July. Well, levity is creeping in. Any more questions from the board at this stage? All right. Good. Let's move into the stage where we hear from the applicant. Good to see you again, Mrs. Anderson. I live in fear of the day that your company sells to some outfit that's going to try to make a quick buck and leave St. Croix County holding the bag on all of your non-metallic mines around here. So I hope that you folks are immune from accidents and the vicissitudes of life, at least as long as I live and am on this board.
I am hopeful too.
A good show.
Thanks for letting me come up. I've tried to write down all of your concerns and questions. I may have missed some, so please interrupt me whenever you'd like. Regarding how I calculated the reclamation
Right.
cost, I do it the same way for all of our sites that I'm in charge of in 18 different counties. I take the total acres as if there were 100 acres open out there right now. And I look at what would it cost our company to hire somebody to reclaim it. Because if, say, Matthew went out of business, the county would need to have enough money to hire somebody to do it. And the reason for such an increase is because costs have gone up over the last 5 years. So I overestimate. So I work my way down. What's it going to cost to move the dirt? And what's it going to cost to seed? What's it going to cost for erosion control, annual maintenance, and any sort of miscellaneous monitoring that has to go out there, whether it's me going out for soil tests or whatever. And then I come up with a cost per acre. And then every year we have to provide St. Croix County with a report of how many acres we have open at the site. Then I take how many acres we have open and I apply that $6,900 to each open acre. So that number, that cost per acre will stay the same, but the bond might not. So for example, we opened, I think, 2 or 3 more acres this year. So when we do our annual reporting in December, I will have to account for that extra 2 acres for the bond. Does that make sense?
It does, but it doesn't explain how you got the 101.
Okay.
Why did you choose 101 acres?
I chose 101 because that would be the total acres that would have been open for the life of the mine. We don't currently have 101 acres open, but there are 101 acres to be mined out there.
That's the potential maximum amount,
Yes,
including the old 36.4 and all the other property that you have under lease? Is
Correct.
that what you're saying?
yes,
So it's the high number then.
yes.
But the cost per unit, or your $500 for the, let's say, the final grazing part of it, that is subject to change over the next 5 years, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So we
Is
normally.
that today's number, or what number?
That
How do you
is-
get that?
That is today's number. So when we go back, typically I reevaluate financial assurance every 5 years. You know, when we do the renewal. So then I look at so 5 years from now, I would look at what are the costs then. And then I would likely have to do a new estimate.
How much did that block, that cell, change from the previous renewal in 2017? What was the
I think-
number then?
I think Kramer had a $134,000 bond, which we supplied when we took over operations for them. And
Yes.
now I'm proposing to increase it, which I do with many of our sites. I propose to increase it substantially.
Well, you have to because the cost of bulldozing and labor and fuel and all of that goes up. right?
Yeah. So for our other sites, as I come before you, you'll likely see increases also.
So when we get to, this is 2022, when we get to 2027, once again, the bond will be far below the amount necessary to do a reclamation.
No, the bond will be reviewed every year for our open acres. So let's say next year, we have 40 acres open. We wouldn't, but let's say we do, then that bond will have to be changed again to make sure there's $6,952 times 40 acres in a bond for the county if they would have to come in and reclaim. So we fly our sites with drones to measure our open acres. The state requires the county to receive a report on what those open acres are, and the county's ordinance requires us to have a bond updated for every open and disturbed acre.
However, the unit cost, the cost per acre, will have changed by a year from now if inflation continues in its normal path.
It very well could. Absolutely.
Ms. Denzer, why don't we have an inflation factor built into this?
I'd have to
Does the
confirm with-
law prohibit us, the state law?
I believe the state law is very strict on what we do and don't do and how much money we can collect and that kind of thing. We can double check that there is an inflation factor. I do know that we do not charge the maximum. There's a very wide range of what we're allowed to charge for the funds, and the majority of it does go to the state, so. But we do not charge the maximum for the maintenance.
Yeah, I'm not talking about charging, I'm
No, I
talking
realize
about
that,
the
but all
amount
of-
of the bond.
Right, but the rules, I think, are very specific. I'd have to double check our ordinance, but
Would you have that checked, please,
Yep,
for
we
us?
can do that.
Before we reach our conclusion here? Thank you, thank you. Are you aware of that? You deal with a lot of these in a lot of counties. Is there a reason why this county could not have an inflation factor built in there, or a straight line from 5-year to 5-year to adjust the cost per acre?
Based on my experience, they rely on the operator to provide the calculations for the financial assurance. That's in some counties. Other counties, they do their own review every 2 to 5 years of what the financial assurance is, and they charge a flat amount on what the county thinks. So it varies, but I have not run into an inflation factor requirement in any of our permits. Not saying that it's not there, it's just I haven't.
So you haven't had to look up whether that would be the county exceeding its authority?
No.
Right. Fair enough. Okay, let's turn to whatever topic you'd like to talk about next.
Let's see, the blasting. Very good questions. I had talked to Karen Cullum, I suppose about maybe a month ago or so, and she had indicated to me that when Kramer was operating the site, that they had promised them a seismograph, and that did not happen. So I did tell her that we would, moving forward, any blasting that we do, put a seismograph down at their property. And they were not on the blast list, the notification list, so I added them both to that.
Was their property on the list? And it's just that it had changed hands?
No,
No.
It wasn't on Kramer's list.
Never was on the list.
not the list that I received. They're on our list now. Yes.
Understood.
you
What
had-
about the crack? Have you seen the cracks? or
I have not,
Have they shown you any pictures?
No, and unfortunately, Kramer didn't supply us with any information about any cracks or anything. What we can do moving forward is we can put the seismograph down there, and we can also offer pre-blast surveys. So it wouldn't cover what may have happened in the past, but it would monitor the house and take a look at the inside of the house before the next blast. That way, if any new cracks form, we have a record of it. But I can't
Yeah, the horse is out of the barn.
exactly.
Did not your deal with Kramer entitle you to copies of their files?
We have all of their files, but if they didn't write it down whenever the Cullums contacted them, then I have nothing.
What assurance do we have that when your top executives are killed in a plane crash and somebody else buys the assets of your company, that your files will be carried forward?
Well, you could make the pre-blast survey or the seismograph reports a requirement to be submitted to you, the board, the county. The seismograph reports are already required to be submitted, which we did. We blasted once this year, and that will be the only blast. The thing about the pre-blast surveys, though, is it does include pictures of the inside of the home. Some landowners do not want that made part of a public record, so that would be.
Up to them.
Yep, but for sure the seismic reports, and also we hire out third-party companies to do the blasting, licensed blasters. They provide the seismograph reports, and we're happy to share them with the landowners. We place 5 seismographs right now, and when we blast next year, if we do, that would be 6, adding the Cullums.
Are you using the same seismic contractor that Kramer did?
Yes. I believe so, yes.
Has the contractor increased the size of the blasts since you took over from Kramer?
No, our conditional use permit that we took over requires a limit of 20,000 cubic yards, and we follow that condition of the permit.
Still the same, okay. Good, go ahead.
Do they still drill holes, drop fertilizer down? Is that the way they blast?
Well, I think in simple terms, that is how they do it. I think it's a little more detailed than that. You know, the holes get drilled to certain depths. There's certain amount of, I guess, is it ANFO? Fertilizer, I think that's what that is
Nitrogen,
added.
yeah.
And then they
Yeah.
detonate each hole milliseconds apart. And in order to fracture the rock, they have to drill so many holes, because when you drill the hole, it actually fractures about 10 to 15 feet around each hole. So that's why they drill numerous holes depending on, you know, for this situation, they can go 20,000 yards. So they'll drill the amount of holes to get that much material.
So how deep are you going? He mentions the water table in here.
Oh,
just-
yes. Thank
Or
you.
the well, I guess, not the water table.
So we're,
That's a good question.
Can you please turn on your microphone?
I think you changed your question in mid-question there.
No, you raise a better question. How high are they above the water table?
A long way.
we're about 140 feet above the water table.
And is that all lime rock?
No, there's about 10 foot of topsoil and overburden, about 60 feet of sand and gravel, and about 30 feet of limestone.
And then below that, is it all dolomite down to the water table?
There could be sandstone under there as well, but we don't intend to go any deeper, so we haven't done any exploration in the bottom of the current floor.
You would not expect to find a layer of sand or of clay between the bottom of your mining and the water table, would you?
No, I would not.
No, it would probably be some kind of rock. So that's what your question is about, the ability to transmit the shock wave? It's rock.
Is that whole area lime rock? Is that all?
They don't know because they haven't drilled below the mine depth.
Like under this house that these people, are they sitting on rock, do you know?
I don't have their well report, but just from my geology days at River Falls, they probably are sitting on, a glacial material, but then lime rock underneath that. Yes.
The foundation would be set in sand or sand, gravel, yep.
Yeah.
That 60-some feet that is overlaying the rock.
Yes.
If you continue blasting, how close are you willing to go to get near this house?
The house doesn't show up on the map, but and you're not going to be able to see this, but I plotted. Could I approach and just, or I could? I don't know. It's up to you. Oh, okay. Oops, I'm sorry. Push the button over here.
Is that what you need?
Yeah, thank you. I plotted this out for my own use to kind of, but it would work good for our conversation. If I could just step away from the. Okay. Can I? Oh, okay, this will work. So this is the quarry, and then if you start up here, those names are where all of our current seismographs are placed, and that Paul and Karen are here. So we would also put one here next year. The extent of our south is, well, it actually wouldn't be right to that line. It would go a little bit north. So that would be, I don't know if that's I think that's about a 40. So it would be really good to start those seismographs now so that as we do move closer, we'll be able to tell, are we getting too much? Is it looking okay? So right now, this is where we're operating.
You point out the home that was in discussion there? Call them.
You want to take their phone and make a screenshot or
I can leave
otherwise
this.
create a record for this? You can leave that one? Okay, that'll become our Exhibit 4. We don't need copies for the board at this point, but for our record, Ms. Anderson has shown on Exhibit 4 the location of the Culham residence. That's the lady who wrote the letter. That is Exhibit 3. And it's located to the southwest of the southwest corner of the subject property. I guess that covers it for the record, if you'd just be kind enough to leave a copy behind when you go. Is that line of questioning finished now?
Well, I was just wondering about the well here, but in reality, anytime you got lime rock, well, I'm not telling anybody anything they don't already know. You run the risk of bacteria and things getting down in the wet water. But I would be more concerned about sewers and septic systems than I would about blasting lime rock as far as contaminating the well.
Well, maybe, Ms. Anderson, you would know, is this the lime feature called karst, in which there are voids and cracks existing already in the limestone?
This limestone is a lot more solid than the karst topography. If you get more over towards Emerald, our Emerald quarry there's a lot of examples of karst. We haven't witnessed any karst in this area. The geology allows for it to be, I want to say non-karsty, but that's just not.
Sure, it doesn't have voids and pre-existing cracks to the same extent.
Correct.
But I suppose there is still the possibility that the blasting could open cracks that would even cause private septic systems to leak to lower levels in the rock, could it not?
The seismographs that we place around the property ensure that there is no damage or vibrations opening up any fissures. The Bureau of Mines has also studied this, and this is where the Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Services came up with the law that established the limits for blasting. So I would not envision there being any fissures or cracks being opened that could cause septics to leak.
And you're saying that the seismograph would reveal if they did open a fissure?
A seismograph would reveal if we were over the required limits that the state has set, that there could be a potential for damage, which could include fissures being opened. Now, I can't look under the ground and see if our blasting caused a fissure to open. When we blast, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, the fracturing of the rock goes out about 10 to 15 feet from the hole, which is why we can't go out and just drill one hole. We have to go out and drill multiple holes to get the rock to fracture enough so we can crush it. So it's a localized energy that happens when you blast.
Let me see if I understand that, not being a geologist. If a person had that, well, the cracks that are intentionally created for purposes of your extracting the rock are the same sort of cracks that would cause a septic failure or the like. Is that a true statement?
I would have to speculate. I don't have any experience with septic systems or that sort of thing.
No, if we were concerned about opening fissures in the vicinity of the Kelheim property, we would say that it requires the same intensity of a blast shock wave that it does in the mine where you are intentionally making cracks. Is that a correct statement?
Well, and we have substantial evidence that shows the vibrations and the intensity dissipates the farther you get from the blast. Mm-hmm. So I really don't see how, and again, all I have is what I know from substantial evidence that it dissipates and it gets less intense the farther away you are. If we were blasting right next to their home, could it? Possibly.
Well, certainly it could. If it were within 10 feet of their well.
Correct, it could.
It'd be a certainty, wouldn't it? But if you're hundreds of feet away, it would be, you're offering us the professional opinion that the shock wave will be so attenuated that there is no significant risk.
I feel very confident about that, particularly because we blast at other locations where there are subdivisions nearby, and we have not had a problem.
Plus, you have some test wells, for instance, at At the Emerald Well, don't you have some test wells there out at the one away on the far east side of the county? I know we required you to put in some test wells there.
We have monitoring wells at our Downing and our Wilson quarries.
Those are the ones, yes. Mhm. Are you satisfied now, Dave?
Yeah. I just wonder about, they also mentioned in here about the size of the blast and how many charges you set off. And I realize that it costs money to keep calling these people back, but is that something you could do to do smaller charges?
We currently have a very small limit on our blasting that was placed on the permit, I want to say back in 2013, to satisfy concerns to the north, which if I wasn't part of this quarry then. So to do less than 20,000 would likely cause us to have to blast more, and 20,000 is already quite low.
That's the trouble. You reduce smaller blasts, but you end up blasting more, yeah.
More frequently.
Yeah.
So it would be a true statement then that this measurement you will be taking at the Coleman home would indicate if that level was high enough to cause damage to that's what it's there for in the first place.
Yes.
Thank you.
End of the line of questioning? Okay. Ms. Anderson, proceed as you wish.
Thank you. The pink area, do you need further explanation?
Why is it pink? What does it signify?
I just thought it would help to make it pink, and it turns out I made it worse. I wanted to show, I'm not sure how to, yes.
Well, you wanted to
sorry.
show that instead of just going straight south, you were going to also go southeast.
I did. I wanted to try to
I think we
show
understand
you
now.
there were always 4 parcels, but the 2 parcels to the east, they were never included in the operations or reclamation plan. So I wanted everybody to understand I was adding them in, and I was doing that to make sure it was in compliance. That was the only reason for my pink.
I think we got it. Thank you.
That was everything I wrote down, but I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Do you wish to offer an opinion whether we should draw a conclusion that the cracks are not caused by natural settlement if they are horizontal cracks rather than vertical cracks?
I would have to hire an engineer to answer that question. We don't run into a lot of cracks in buildings. I haven't personally run into a lot of situations where we've caused cracking, so I can't speak to whether it was from Kramer's blasting or not.
In other words, you have no opinion on it,
I do not.
right? Anybody else a question?
Any idea what the legal requirement is to maintain the blasting records? Is it like a 7-year requirement or 10-year? Anything along that line?
I don't know that off the top of my head, no.
Having been at a couple of these renewal hearings in the past, I can tell you, for anyone who has, of the board members who are newer, that the blasting records being sent to us is just a paper trail. There are state agencies they send all their reports to. We've gone over this in excessive detail in the past, And it's just this, there's a state agency that monitors what they do, so.
No. Nothing else, Mrs. Anderson? Anybody else in the room want to speak in favor of this application? Anybody want to speak against it, or in a neutral fashion, or any comments, whatever? Sir, take the podium if you've already signed in.
Yeah, I did sign in, and I am Paul Cullum. I did show up today for this year.
Oh, good.
As far as the cracks, we really can't tell if they were before or after the last blast or anything. They're present, they're on the seam of the sheetrock. So, I mean, they're repairable. Blast size was a big concern of ours, along with property values in the future. Guess other than that, I didn't have any further comments.
When did you buy your house, Mr. Cullheim, and move into this place?
2015.
Okay. And have the cracks appeared subsequent to 2015, or were they there already?
They were after 2015.
What year did they appear?
It was probably like 3 years ago.
I see.
You have any idea what year the house was built?
1999.
And I take it you're willing to have a seismograph placed on your property? Are you willing to have the records that it produces held by the county as well as other places?
Yes,
Okay,
definitely.
good.
And like Candy said, we have had some conversation between her and my wife, so.
And it's amicable at this stage?
Hmm?
Yeah, good. Anything else you want to tell us, or do you have a request with regard to our renewal as the staff recommends, and our extension of their authority?
Well, I was under the assumption that the pink area was the area that was going to be expanded to. It does get quite a bit closer to my property, which I definitely do have concerns with.
Mm-hmm. Unless there's a huge building boom, it won't move very rapidly.
Yeah, I know like the Birch area, which is, Craig Birch is my neighbor, they have property that their intentions down the road is to have that sold off, and property value is kind of important to them also.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's important to all of us, of course. It's a factor in what we do here as a board. So, thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your testimony. How long do you think it'll take to do the research, Ms. Denzer, to determine whether we can have an inflation factor built into the bond requirement?
I already have the answer to that.
Good show. May we have it?
Yep. Our ordinance, I'll start with that, already allows that the zoning administrator may periodically evaluate the amount, and if he feels that the amount of the bond is insufficient for reclamation, then he can notify the applicant, giving certain amount of notification, and it has to be a hearing before this board before it can be raised. So there's really no point in putting an automatic inflationary point in from our ordinance standpoint, because we'd still have to go through those steps. Also, when I go to the state administrative code, which is based on the statutes, it has now again, we had a pre-existing ordinance, so our ordinance can be slightly more restrictive. If it had, for those of you who don't know that, it can, more restrictive than state statutes, and is. And this is one instance where we have some authority. Otherwise, basically, it says very straightforwardly that all financial assurances, there are calculations that have to be made. They're based on $1989 with very specific state-identified inflationary factors that are put in here as a note, and the ongoing note says you can get more information. So they have so much, like, for instance, 1992, the inflationary factor was 4.6%. 1990, it was 6.1%. 1991, it was 3.1%. They have very specific numbers they assign.
So if we wanted to not contest the state law but follow it, we could use the numbers that they provide, assuming they're still doing that.
Right, but then you couldn't, then you couldn't increase it over the 5 years. If you took away that authority in our ordinance and started following this more closely, then it would be 5 years it's in place, and then you go back and look at it. Whereas our ordinance does already have the authority for the zoning administrator to evaluate whether or not the number is becoming out of date due to inflation, and then go through the public hearing process to request that it be increased.
If we were to do it for this one, we should, in fairness, do it to all non-metallic mines in the county. Should we
Do
not?
what to this one?
If we were going to make those adjustments after a hearing.
Correct, but they have offered an updated number, so what, we would simply have to go back and study it and see if we felt it was high enough at this time, which then I would suggest you postpone a decision on this hearing and not have a second one.
But we could choose to examine it in 3 years, for example, and see if an increase in the bond was justified at that point.
You could.
If we gave a hearing, but if we were to use a process like that, we'd want to do it for all miners.
Correct, and at this
Presumably.
point, we have a 5-year, I mean, we have to all acknowledge that we have not been in a high inflationary situation for a couple decades. And this is, right now, we're in a high inflationary situation, which is unusual. So perhaps that's a mitigating circumstance. Frankly, from our point of view, I would say it just would mean that, based on today's hearing, we would be encouraged to check it every 2 years, or something like that. Because that's what it says, we can do it periodically. I can find the exact wording here. Have it up, if you'd prefer. Gotta get to the right spot here.
If we were going to schedule a hearing, well, yeah. We'd be okay to, we'd be up to date if we approved, if we just adopted the staff recommendation today, and we'd be up to date as of today. The question is whether we would still be, whether we would have fallen so far behind in 5 years that it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, as we see in this application.
Correct, but it also is, you have to remember, it's for that situation in which the owner-operator defaults. That's the situation it's for. It's not just, there's no
sure.
other purpose to it, so.
Yes, Mr. Peterson.
I think I'm missing something here, because I heard Ms. Anderson say that she reviews yearly. Does she coordinate with you on that then, if she finds an issue? And I'm thinking, I don't want to make more work for county staff if we have to. I'm thinking of cost or whatever. So if there's some way we can get, if she's coordinating with them, wouldn't a simple statement that if adjustments need to be made, that it's a mutual thing rather than getting too involved in it? Just thought.
Is that likely to work, Ms. Denzer?
It certainly can. We review, every year, we have to send out letters to all the non-metallic mines in the county and obtain the fees that we have annually we collect, and then send those fees, keep our portion and send the rest on to the state, of course. And so we're in contact with them on an annual basis, and actually multiple contacts. Kevin's in charge of that. He does those contacts, and with assistance from another staff person in order to always have a backup. So we could simply do as you're suggesting, and look and perhaps in our annual letter suggest that, well, this year's inflationary rate was, and we want to see, please provide, an adjustment to your annual numbers based on that. And there are official inflationary rates. Obviously, this last year and this year, they kind of move faster than anybody can even pinpoint them. On the other hand, they've been going up and down. So again, it's going to be, no matter what we do, it's going to be a dart, because there's always a point, a date certain that you have to live with, regardless of what happens 3 months later. And I think that's the unusual times we're in, and I don't know that that it's appropriate to create a whole standard for this in the conditions when we don't know when that might go back to a more normal operation. So I think Supervisor
Makes a good
Peterson
point.
makes a good point. This should be handled more at an administrative level, given the unusual situation we have.
And you could always check to see what the state number is for that most recent year, and that together with a submittal from the mine operator would give you information. If you felt hearing was justified, you'd set it up on an agenda.
And I also think after reading the statute, what we should probably just, as part of our review this year, we should sit down, and I don't think it would be that hard to do, and make sure that we have, all of the operations have been meeting the inflationary guidelines issued by the state.
Want to give us kind of an update at our next meeting?
You think we can get it done in 1 month? I should be looking
Or
at
you can
Kevin.
give it-
Kevin's shaking his head.
Could
How about
be a
in 2 months?
Progress report that says we started, but we aren't ready yet.
That's fine too, but we
We'll
could maybe
just-
shoot for 2
We'll
months to
Put it on
have.
for the next 2
yeah.
months' agendas.
Yeah, because we are in our
Fair enough.
busy time for sanitary reviews. End of summer gets really crazy for us.
Good, but let's not let it slip into the Thanksgiving to holiday season
Okay.
when you're also short-staffed. Okay, with all of that, board members, does it sound like we'd like to close the hearing, take no more testimony, and proceed to a decision? Sounds like it to me, too. Is there anybody in the room who now thinks they want to say one more thing? 2 more things? Anything? No? All right, I'm declaring the hearing closed then at 11:16. And I myself think we could do well to adopt the staff recommendation. But it's up to you to make motions. I only do it in default when nobody else, when others are flummoxed or something. So what do you think?
I'll make a motion, we adopt the staff recommendation as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, Miller and Peterson. We have the motion to adopt the plan that's been presented to us. Any further discussion? Any debate? Any reservations? Mr. Nickum is moving to the microphone.
I just want to mention the concern about the landowners around here, that they're going to check the seismic movement, so the staff will be notified of that if it's excessive.
I'm gathering that, yes, the staff currently gets the seismic reports, and the company has offered to provide them the pre-blast survey results too, as I understand it. And so they will have those records. And those records are, in a sense, good for all concerned, because if a homeowner, let's say, is selling a house and a new owner comes in and doesn't have this background and they wish to sue the company, it's nice to have records that, verify what is the history of the property.
And we get all those electronically, so they're easily shared as a public record if someone requests them.
All right, it sounds like we're probably ready to vote. So all in favor, vote aye. Say aye. And all opposed, say nay. It's carried unanimously. Okay, thank you all. The questioning's been a little bit intense today compared to some of these, but then there are views on both sides and so on and so on. Now, we have one more matter to deal with here, but I propose that we take a bathroom break and then we take up the matter of the alleged violations of the Apple River Hideaway and the possibility of scheduling a hearing for revocation of their permit. So it's 11:19 by the clock on the wall. Let's resume no later than 11:25 by the same clock. All right? Says 11:27, so we're resuming activities here, and guess we give the podium to you, Mr. Wozniak. Tell us about this situation. And we're
Okay.
joined now, I see, by the county's Corporation Council, for the record, Heather Amos. Do you want to introduce yourself, Heather? for the record?
Yes, I am the Corporation Counsel, Heather Amos. I started in this position in February. I know some of you from the county board and some of the faces are new, but I'm here if there's any questions on this item 3 under business items.
Good, thank you. Mike?
Very good. I'll get started with this. This item was added to the board's agenda. A consideration of complaints, alleged violations at Apple River Hideaway and in the town of Somerset, basically a discussion for the board to consider whether scheduling at a subsequent meeting, potentially a September meeting, a revocation hearing to consider whether there's whether revocation of a conditional use permit for the Apple River Hideaway operation would be warranted. I'll note this is not a public hearing today, so the board can't take testimony on this, but this is more a limited overview of issues, so you can determine whether scheduling a hearing at a subsequent meeting, again, the soonest opportunity would be the regular meeting date of September 22nd next month.
You're saying that all we can decide today is whether to schedule a hearing or not?
Yes, we're just looking for that level of direction because we would, if the board feels further discussion is warranted, we would need to schedule a hearing. I've got a few slides just to structure a little discussion here on this, provide you a little information to help you reach the conclusion whether you feel that's an appropriate measure. The Apple River Hideaway in the Section 2 of the town of Somerset in off of 170th Avenue, 712 170th Avenue is the address of this property. This is just a map actually from the Apple River Hideaway's website that gives a general layout of the property, and all those little dots essentially are campsites, and there are a couple clusters where there's buildings, whether for storage or a camp store, concession kind of building, and a stage for some of the music performances that occur in the central part of the campground area. There's a 3 camper cabin structures in the general area of my cursor, and then at the far eastern part of the site there is what's recognized as a bar concession, and there's a kind of an event tent cover and a stage for another performance area. I'll show you a couple pictures of these just so you have a little sense of this property because it's pertinent to the issues of concern. Again, here's another aerial photo view of the property. There's a kind of linear access, and then it essentially runs along, fronting on the Apple River. And I will note that with zoning, the property is divided between 2 zone districts. The bulk of the site is in the R1 residential zone per our Chapter 15 zoning ordinance and map. And then the eastern portion of the property, there's an area that is in the county C1 commercial zone district. this isn't a exhaustive history of this, but I'll give you a little bit of overview on this. Currently, to our knowledge, there's in effect, there is a special exception, what we now consider conditional use permit, and that was granted on May 22nd, 1991, by the county, by the Board of Adjustment, and it was at the time requested by Steve Montbriand. A prior special exception permit we have record, was rescinded by the Board of Adjustment at a special revocation hearing in December of 1990. So the one that's in place now actually followed an earlier permit. And I don't have the details on why that revocation was occurred. Would have to research that further if you wish to further consider this item at a subsequent meeting. The special exception or conditional use permit, which I think I will refer to it going forward, approved in 1991, is for tubing on the river, camping, and provided for 2 outdoor open-air concerts. And included with some materials in the packet that were provided to for the Board of Adjustment was a copy of the decision document on that permit, and also some other materials that relate to complaints and sort of activities, the music-related activities that are really the issues of concern from the complaints and comments we've received from public and town officials. The food concession bar area facility located at the far eastern edge of the Hideaway property it wasn't part of the operation when it was permitted in 1991, and it was later leased from the abutting Sinclair property and then subsequently acquired. I believe that occurred around 2013. There was kind of an adjustment because there had been an area zoned commercial, but it didn't coincide where the actual concession bar building was located. So an adjustment was made and a property transfer occurred, again, around that 2013 time period. And a liquor license was granted by the town of Somerset, and I believe from our records that was around 2010. I'm not sure if our records are complete on that, but that's what I found on record in our file.
That piece of property on the eastern edge there that was subject to the lease and acquisition, is that subject to county zoning, or is that part of the village?
All of this is subject to county zoning.
Okay, was there a conditional use permit for that pink
There
area
was.
also?
It dates to 1984.
So it's still in existence to this date?
That's my understanding. And
Okay.
it was initially for a food concession, didn't have the liquor, there wasn't a liquor license, and that came later. And then then the idea was you could get a beer and a burger, and it was right off the river, and it was acquired and consolidated with the Apple River Hideaway property.
So we also have a conditional use permit for that segment of the property that would be different from the one that's in our homework here.
Yes, and it again wasn't included in the 1991 special exception or conditional use because it was not part of the property then.
Understood. But now they're under common ownership.
Correct.
Does it have a revocation feature also?
I would have to scrutinize that. I haven't checked that record yet.
Okay, okay,
I think we have access to that, that decision document.
no doubt. Thank you. Proceed.
Just a few visuals. I've been out to the property and just wanted to get a visual of the site and what some of the features look like. My photographs aren't exhaustive of showing the whole property, but just a few highlights. The actual bar concession at the east end of the property, there's a metal building that's kind of to the right of this photo, but what was added was a stage which you're looking towards, and an event tent that basically sort of connects the stage and the concession building, where you can go up to the counter and get your beer and your burger, I guess, and and be under roof. The view towards the river, again, at that east end of the property, you can see it's up on a rise, but it overlooks the Apple River. This is another part of the site, kind of the centrally more east to west with the lay of the site, that this is a large stage that I think this was probably what was envisioned for use, or was the result of that permit from 1991, where the 2 concerts per season were authorized, and presumably they would have been conducted at this stage. At least that would be my understanding. And this stage does face east. There was a requirement that speakers be oriented to the east and towards a wooded area further east on the property. There are some other structures, including a sort of a camp store concession building. I believe it may serve as a bar as well. I think they sell liquor in that building. There are some camper cabins, 3 of them, that the county did deal with in recent years, a few years ago probably now, a question of setback from the ordinary high water mark, and I think those were relocated, so they would be conforming to that requirement. I just want to give a quick overview of complaints violations. Because this has been in operation, the facility, for many years, going back to that 1991 or even predating that, there may be complaints further back, but in recent years, going back to at least 2018, there have been complaints primarily about noise and the number of concert or music events. And I say music events because it seems that these events in recent years have been DJ-driven playing of recorded music and sometimes some other performance activities with some light shows associated with it as well. And the terminology used in 1991, though, was concerts. These complaints have continued through this summer. Again, they've been focused on the music events, and I'll call it DJ-hosted music/light shows, including concerns about noise, a number of events, and late-night hours of the music events. And during the past several years, music events have exceeded 2 concerts per events per season authorized by the 1991 CUP. And also, the evening ending time of 11 p.m. that was called out in that 1991 permit has been frequently exceeded, with the music events extending as late as 2 a.m. And that's both based on comments and complaints from area residents, as well as the applicant's own Facebook page, which include schedules of when performances occur and videos that are time-stamped that tell you when the performance was occurring. Enforcement action to date, I reached out earlier this year to Mike Cappers, the owner-operator, and we sent a notice of alleged violations to Mr. Cappers on March 28th of this year that was included with your packet, just so you have a sense of the way we've approached this initially with Mr. Cappers. I'll note that he responded indicating that he had one weekend event planned for this year, June 19th through 21st, and indicated that the speakers would be pointed east towards the large hill and ending by 11 p.m. Well, what I would tell you is several multi-day concerts, events have been in fact held this summer in June, July, and August. They had something in June called the Digital Music Festival. That was the one I think Mr. Cappers was referring to. There was something called the Floaty Fest on the 4th of July weekend, and more recently, not this immediate past weekend, but the weekend prior, there was an event called the Beer Olympics. And again, these events were multi-day, and I think the county's our view of that special exception would be that the two concerts would be 2 days of concert as opposed to multi-day events. But as you can see, this year, and as well as previous years, it seems there are multiple multi-day events that were conducted on the property. I note that in addition, Mr. Cappers has indicated he regularly has music at the concession bar located again at the east end of the property, and seems to feel that that's separate from the limitation on the two concerts. I would note that in looking at the record of approval for the concession, the original approval, as well as anything subsequent, I have not found any record of anything that authorized music events or entertainment as part of that. It seemed like it was just relating to food and beverages. To ensure that the hideaway operates in compliance with applicable regulations and permits, a revocation hearing and consideration of this matter is warranted by the Board of Adjustment, would be the staff position. That was actually a condition of the 1991 special exception, that the board could take that action if there were any violations of the conditions. So I believe that's why, as staff, we're bringing this up and suggesting that you take that step and determine whether you see there's sufficient basis for revocation or some other kind of action related to the Apple River Hideaway operation. Just a little more here, follow up on this discussion. A condition of the 91 permit read, violation of any part of the special exception will result in the right for the revocation hearing, as I've just stated. Now, sufficient evidence of noncompliance in respect to limitation regarding the number of concerts, the two, and the hours they may be conducted, 10 a.m. to 11 p.m., we believe sufficient evidence exists to justify the board's holding a revocation hearing meeting at its September 22nd regular meeting, if you're so inclined to do so, to further review complaints and evidence of failure to comply with required conditions. We would provide a more detailed and exhaustive report for you if you choose to go this route. In terms of summarizing, based on Community Development Department staff understanding of the Apple River Hideaway current operations, revocation of the 1991 conditional use permit may be warranted. The owner operator of the hideaway would have the option of reapplying for approval to operate under revised conditions. I don't want to understate the, certainly this would be there'd be many considerations for the board to take this step. The zoning has changed in recent years with our Chapter 15, and there are some challenges in that some things can be allowed in the in the commercial C1 zoning, and some of what they do can be allowed in the R1, but there are limitations. The C1, for example, doesn't provide for bars and like food concessions. So yet you have at least an aspect of what they're doing as a legal non-conforming use. So it's a lot to consider, and staff would provide a detailed report with more history and more background on the consequences of revoking the CUP if the board was inclined to do so. Again, I'd say that decision determinations would have to be made regarding applicability of current zoning classifications and how various uses conducted by the hideaway, Apple River Hideaway, may be best regulated under provisions of current regulations, including zoning, shoreland, overlay district, and floodplain regulations, as well as the county's sanitary regulations. So if you're starting fresh with a review of the operations, it's going to look comprehensively at all of the issues and concerns there may be, as we would with any new proposal. At that, if you have any questions of staff, I'd be happy to try to address them. Otherwise, we're just seeking direction. If you're inclined to have us follow up with scheduling a revocation hearing and consideration at the September meeting, you can give us direction on that.
Mike, if would we be considering both of those sections? And I guess my question is, would we even want to consider only one? Because what would preclude them from pushing the problem from one area into the other, which we wanted to address? And then my other thought is, with the occurrences on the Apple River in the last few weeks, yeah, I'd have some real concerns too.
Well, that has ramped up local concerns, including from town officials who are quite concerned about it, and it seems that the heightened activity with the music events and the late hours that seem to be outside of the permitted hours, as well as the number of events, seem to be the issue here. And I guess what we'd have to consider is the entirety of the operation and what's allowed where and when, and whether there's enough failure to comply with the current permit or permits to justify action by the board.
How do you decide what is a major event and what isn't?
Well, you'd probably get out some dictionaries and you'd probably write us a staff report on your research, and we'd have a chance to hear from our corporation counsel and compare it to other precedents, other permits, history. Do we have any record of complaints to the sheriff's office pertaining to the permit
Haven't obtained that yet, but we'll follow up on that if you decide to move forward with a hearing and meeting to further discuss it. We'll provide you whatever
I
information.
see the conditions call for a campground plan with state approvals. Do we have one of those that's current for the operation? That's condition number 2. Are you asking us, is that a potential violation? Is the quiet time in the campground where the gates are closed, that's condition number 3. Is that something that you might have evidence for us? I understand that condition 4, having to do with the definition of a concert and 2 times per year, is something that you've talked about. How about the less than 1,000 people? This wide advertising suggests that they might be going beyond that number too. Ms. Denzer?
I would just say that based on the complaints, phone calls and otherwise that I have taken, everything about their operation should be up for consideration because they seem to be violating just about everything. Now, it'd be good to hear that personally. I personally want to hear the revocation permit to give the citizens an opportunity to testify.
How about the access? Has your staff been given access anytime they want it, as this calls for?
That hasn't been an issue. Like I said, I've been out to the property. I've been invited out to the property by Mr. Capper, so we're not being denied access or anything. I think there may be a difference of view on, well, what's just allowed for ongoing sort of nightly entertainment versus concert events. And then it seemed like, if you can go to the Apple River Hideaway Facebook page and you can see videos of the type of performances, and it's loud music and light shows, and I'm sure it's fun and exciting, but at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. in the morning, maybe not too palatable for the property owners.
Neighborhood residents, yeah. How about the ability of the town board to have access whenever they want for inspection? Have they been kept out, or are they allowed?
I was out there over the weekend with Lenny Germain from the town board of the town of Somerset, and there wasn't that much going on, but we had free access to the property, and I don't think that's an issue. The town, of course, has granted them a liquor license.
So they have authority to inspect based on that as well.
Correct.
Ms. Amos, if the board has the authority to revoke the permits based on adequate evidence, does it also have the authority to modify the permit?
I would say yes. There are no specific rules in the rules governing the Board of Adjustment that address how a revocation hearing should proceed, but I would indicate that you could either revoke the permit, keep the permit as is, or modify conditions. Those would be my 3 options that I believe that the board could proceed with. So I do believe that would be appropriate, especially since there are no definitions of what concert hours mean, what a concert is, and also number 3 indicates that the campground have quiet time between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. Does that mean the entire property, just where the campsites are located? I think those are a couple of the issues that Mr. Cappers will bring forward that he indicates they're not clearly defined in here and that the Board of Adjustment would have to make a decision on.
If we revoke, then I take it the owner would have to apply and pay an application fee.
Correct.
And if they wanted permits on both sites, they'd pay 2 application fees.
Whatever the rules of the community development are for applications, and there might be numerous applications that are needed if there's different sections of the code that he needs to comply with, as Mr. Wozniak indicated, general zoning, shoreland, floodplain. There might be several areas that will need to be addressed.
Thank you. Ms. Denzer, do you see the potential for a variance application as well as a CUP application?
We haven't talked about any specific variants at this time. We do offer discounts for additional, like a second CUP on the same property or the same activity. So there would be some discounts in terms of prices, but yes, I think that we need to be given the details of the actual operations that they propose or that they're conducting right now, full details, and then this board has the opportunity based on what is allowed and what isn't allowed to regulate it. Personally, I think it'd be cleaner to revoke the permit and start fresh. I don't think modifying this permit is in our best interest going forward. Obviously, at some point, historically, this site had a revoked permit, which back in the 1980s would have been a very rare occurrence. And so I think that just begs the question, why wouldn't we move forward clean again?
I take it that no matter what we do, we will be too late for the Music and Camping Festival scheduled for September 3rd. I'm looking at page 121 in our packet, which is evidently a screenshot. So they're coming to the end of their season, and whatever we may do, oh, I see there's something scheduled for October 20, Halloween in the Sticks.
Some of those might be from prior years.
Oh,
I'm not sure if it's 2022.
okay,
But
all right. So most likely, we'll be talking about things that will take effect next year if we go down this road.
yeah, I mean, I don't know for certain what plans the Mr. Cappers may have for the rest of the season. When I was out over the weekend on the site, town board member Jermaine, he actually called Mike Cappers, and we wanted to make sure he was okay with us looking around part of the site, and he suggested that the bar concession was closed for the season, so we'll see. Odd that it would be closed before Memorial Day weekend with great weather coming up, but we'll see.
Is 1,000 our current trigger number, Ms. Denzer, for the large group, large gathering ordinance?
I don't believe that the town has we don't have a large gathering ordinance. St. Croix County does not.
Oh, we don't?
No.
Ours was previously revoked, I guess, pursuant to a court case.
Oh,
So we do not have a large assembly ordinance at this time.
I see. But I bet the committee's hard at work creating a new one.
I believe, as Ms. Denzer indicated, I think the town has a large assembly ordinance, and a lot of the local municipalities have been adopting large assembly ordinances instead of it being regulated by the county.
Oh,
But I think it's been probably, I don't want to say how many years, but several years since we've had one in effect.
I'm thinking that, I remember a time I don't think it was this property, in which there was a requirement that the sheriff's staff that there would be fees paid by the operators, and that in turn reimbursed the sheriff for the overtime costs to have people present at large gatherings for public safety concern reasons. So
There are many conditions like that that have been placed on large event activities in recent years, last 5 to 10 years, that are not in place on this older activity. And many of those kind of conditions would be what we would do with a completely new permit. And you're correct, there have been numerous event-like situations that we have experience with, that's the kind of situation we should be dealing with here. Kind of regulation and conditions we should be dealing with here.
do we have authority in the absence of a large event ordinance to impose a requirement that relates to public safety and the presence of sheriff's staff?
We have in the past without any problem.
Oh.
That large event ordinance lasted barely less than a year before it was thrown out, so.
But we can get to the same results of protecting
Yes.
concert goers.
And it's better to do that, make it site-specific, it's more responsive
Okay,
to the situation.
all right.
Didn't we
Just
do that in
curious.
Speedway? Last-
Might have,
may
yeah,
have.
maybe that's what I'm thinking of, was
I think that might have been what,
Cedar Lake Speedway. Well, board members, do you have questions? I've been dominating discussion here. Questions for Mike or the staff? We're not taking public testimony today because it isn't a hearing as such. And all we're doing is deciding to hold a hearing. Due to the, I consider this, it sounds to me like we have a problem. And it falls in our lap to do something about it. And I wish we could move more quickly than our next meeting, or that would be our September meeting. Too late to deal with this upcoming weekend, of course, and the possibility of problems happening before we can even get to this, you know. But due to the needs to publish for a hearing, we probably couldn't get anything in much quicker anyway. You know, you need a couple of weeks of notice, and it's got to fall when the newspaper's published and that kind of thing. All right, any more discussion before we entertain a motion? Yes.
I would suggest that we will try to, if you want, I'd like you to add it in your motion, if you would like us to bring both conditional use permits forward for revocation. And if there's some limitation on the other one, which we haven't reviewed yet, that can be brought up but at least your motion would cover both. That way we have the option.
Would you also like authorization from us to consult with the sheriff's department and get their recommendation, if they have one, to conditions that we might, give them a handle?
Yes, thank you.
You know, anything else? Traffic, highway? Do you want authority to talk to them? You'll do that anyway. I mean, I noticed one of the emails had to do with people racing around on the streets and evidently creating hazards there.
And we will, of course, make sure the town is alerted, because we believe they will have quite a few suggestions.
And what, I see that we have a town member introduced himself out in the hallway, and he's here. At what point will we invite the town to comment? I mean, I guess it's just an open season. They're free to comment whenever they wish.
Correct. They can come, I would imagine they will come to the revocation hearing and provide direct testimony. And hopefully, given that someone is here today, they will get their town board to act in concert versus as individuals. So
You
they
want
could-
them to sing? Is that it?
No, as a group,
Oh.
you know what, in concert.
To act together.
Yes,
To take formal action. To give us any suggestions they may have for actions we might take on their
yeah.
behalf.
As
Yeah.
both an agency and I expect there'll also be people testifying from the town based on conversations I've had as individuals. That's all I meant.
And we invite emails and written stuff as usual, yeah. Okay, not to prejudge it, maybe all of the rest of you don't even want to touch this thing. But if one of you doesn't make a motion, I will.
Well, one more quick question. How about site visits by us? That should be allowed?
It's, if they turn you away, they're in violation.
Okay.
Document it. Yeah, if you're free this weekend and care to go out there and see what's actually happening at 1 or 2 a.m. I don't know that we really want you being a witness, but can if necessary.
You may or may not have that opportunity for the rest of the season, but you could certainly view some of the videos on the Facebook page that give you a decent representation.
Of things that have already occurred, yes.
Correct.
And maybe they'll publicize the events of this weekend, too. Yeah.
I'll make a motion, we go ahead with a revocation hearing scheduled when convenient.
I'll second.
Good. And do you agree that we are directing the staff to consult with the sheriff's department and to take input from the town board
They should take inputs from all applicable players.
All right, fair enough, yeah. Further discussion, you've heard the motion to proceed and set it for a hearing at the next meeting and bring us both permits and input from wherever they can get it, from all applicable players, as Mr. Miller puts it so eloquently. All in favor of the motion should now vote aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. It passes unanimously. So that's how we'll deal with that item. I assume that for the next meeting, you'll give us a new board packet that will include all the old stuff as well as a bunch of new material. Okay, do we have any, thank you for coming and for listening, and make your inputs as you feel appropriate. Not by calling us, though, because that puts us in an awkward spot that we then have to try to remember and repeat what you told us and fight off the demons of having already made up our mind before the hearing starts, and so we don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Do we have any procedural matters to talk about? Our next meeting must be September something or other. It's probably on the bottom of the agenda.
It says 22nd in the notes.
September 22nd. And it'll be 10:30, I suppose, as the usual time?
Or 9:30.
Or will it be 9:30?
I will request 9:30.
That'd be good.
You will
That's
be
good,
informed if
because-
it does not happen.
And we'll have a Riverway matter that was pulled at the request of the applicants, and we'll have this.
We also will have an appeal of a staff interpretation of the ordinance. It has to do with a property owner who is interested in a house design that would have a deck cantilevered, partially cantilevered over a steep slope, a 25% or greater slope. And so just for your interest, I won't go into that further, but it has to do with the staff position that would not be permissible under our ordinance.
Well, the thrills never end. Any other business? Okay, I declare us adjourned at 12:09.